In this episode, we're going to take an overview of the Lupo Dayled and Superpanel lights. Now, for those of you in the United States, you may have never heard of the brand Lupo. Lupo has been making photographic and lighting and cinema equipment since 1930. They originally started with accessories for filmmaking, and in the 90s moved into lighting for TV and broadcast. And that's what we're going to look at today. These are professional grade lights. So they're a step above. They are a little bit more expensive, as you might expect, but they also have some features that you're not going to find in the less expensive items. Let's take a closer look. First of all, color quality is critically important when you're talking about lighting for film and video projects, and the Lupo Dayleds do very nicely here. Now, to measure this, I used my Sekonic C700U spectrometer, and what we found is at 1 meter. The following you can read for yourself. If you want to see all the details, go ahead and pause here. The CRI is very good, especially on the daylight models. Now, in addition to the CRI rating, which is not a perfect rating, it does have some issues, but I usually find it to be a pretty good indicator. There are also these extended color patches, and specifically R9, R13, and R15 are fairly close to skin tones, and so are important in the overall color rendering of skin tones. And what I found here, again, for the daylight models is that they all came out in the mid-90s, which is very good. We had similar measurements for the Superpanel, which is the LED panel. And then the dual color Dayled 1000, because it is a switching color, you can go from 3200 Kelvin up to 5600 Kelvin, so tungsten to daylight. It did sacrifice a little bit of CRI, but it's still very much in the usable range at 92 and higher. Another important metric is the CCI, which is Color Correction Index. And what this measures is the green to magenta cast. So checking to see if there's any cast of those two colors. And what we found here is they're all very close to zero. So that was fantastic as well. Sometimes something you see on lesser lights is you see a little bit of color fringing around the edges or chromatic aberration. And I checked that on each of these lights and I didn't see any issues with that as well. The fall off was neutral in terms of its color and generally very smooth. You can see here in terms of color temperature, they were all very close as well. The 650 was probably the farthest off at about 400 Kelvin, and the others were all quite close, so that's good as well. Beam angle is something that's very important too, because you need to understand how much light you're concentrating versus flooding. In the case of the Dayled Fresnels, what we found is we had the exact same range that you would normally expect on the older school tungsten Fresnels that you would see from Arri, for example, and that is a 15 to 55 degree range. On the dual color models, it looks like it's 18 to 50 degrees. And then on the Superpanel, it's 50 degrees. The daylight colored Dayled lights and the Superpanel each put out an impressive amount of light. As expected, the Dayled 2000 was really impressive in terms of its ability to put out light. And the Superpanel as well was very impressive. It put out nearly twice the amount of light that my Aperture Lightstorm LS1S puts out. So I always considered that to be a fairly powerful light. This Superpanel almost doubles that. And it's dual color. Of course, keep in mind that beam angle is a very important factor when you're measuring light output, so I've indicated the output with the beam angle so that you can see exactly what was happening there. Now, when you get up into professional level gear, one of the things you're looking for is high quality build, and Lupo has done a fantastic job here. The body of each of the Dayleds is made out of a fiber reinforced technopolymer structure. That seems like a really fancy name for a kind of space age plastic. The nice thing about it is it's super tough. It seems like it would have no problem holding together if you drop it. Of course, you'd never want to drop it, but if you did, it seemed like it would fare pretty well at staying together. And it's also lightweight, so that makes it a lot more convenient as well. The barn doors are all metal, very nice in terms of their precision tolerances, and they have these built-in clips that hold gels, so that can be really nice too, so you don't have to kind of scramble around looking for C47s or clothespins, as we often call them. The AC cable is permanently attached with a strong cable retention assembly, one of the strongest I've ever seen. It's also a heavy gauge cable, and it's 9 feet long with a grounded plug, 2.75 meters for those that reckon in meters. The yokes for all of the units were very heavy gauge, all metal, and they look like they are built to last for a good long time. The focusing knobs for the Fresnel lights also felt very nice, nicely damped, very good precision, very nicely built. Thermal design is a really important factor as well that you won't necessarily see on the consumer and prosumer level lights. And the reason that's so important is it protects the longevity of your LED and the internal electronics of the light as well. One thing I've heard of on less expensive lights is that if you orient the light in certain ways, so for example, orient it straight up at the ceiling, that in some cases, the larger lights get so hot that they actually shut off. I did a similar test of that here with the Dayled 2000 pointed straight at the ceiling at full power for 20 minutes, no issues whatsoever. And other factors related to thermal design, these things never get hot to the touch. You don't have to worry about gloves, you can pack them away as soon as you're done shooting. You turn them off and stick them in a bag, you're good to go. All of the Dayled and the Superpanels are powered from 90 to 240 volts. You can use them pretty much in any part of the world, which is super nice. Now, power draw is very important, especially if you're going to be shooting on location, and here are the specs that I measured for each of the lights in terms of wattage. And what you can see here is that these are very realistic to use on regular old household circuits. In most cases, you should be able to power 3 of them on a household circuit without breaking a fuse or a breaker. The Dayleds and Superpanel can also be battery powered. They have a V-mount plate available. To give a simple illustration of how much battery life you can expect, on the Dayled 1000 set to 100%, I was able to get an hour and a half battery time with a 155 watt V-mount battery. One of the reasons I'm very excited about the Dayleds is that Fresnel lights are hard lights, and hard lights are really versatile. You can go from one end of the spectrum to the other in terms of hard versus soft. So that makes them very useful in almost every circumstance. And the thing is if you have a soft light source, you can't make it hard. So for example, an LED panel, you can't make that a hard light source. It just doesn't happen. It's not possible in terms of physics with the way they're designed. But with the Fresnels, you can cut the light, you can use it as a very hard light if you want hard shadows, but you can also soften it by shooting it through a scrim, shooting it through soft frost or other diffusion. You can put it in a softbox, you can bounce it off a bounce board, all of these different things. So you have all sorts of versatility when you have a Fresnel light like these. One thing that can sometimes be a problem on less expensive lights is flicker. We did some tests here and we did not find any flicker, even when we went to 60 frames per second, 11.2 degree shutter angle, which is roughly the equivalent of 1/2000th of a second. Up at the higher shutter speeds is where you're going to start to see flicker, and we were not able to detect any on any of the units. Now, we talked about thermal design a little while ago. There are fans in each of these, and there need to be, so that you can have a lighting instrument that's going to last you for a number of years. And they've done a nice job, it appears, based on the testing that we've done so far. But I care deeply about sound for film, and I'm always worried that the fans are going to be too loud. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, especially with Fresnels aren't generally something that you use in really, really close to your talent. Generally, they're going to be back a little bit farther than you're used to with, say, for example, an LED panel. So what I found is that none of these were problematic in terms of the amount of fan noise that they make based on the normal working distance. The 650 is super quiet, and you could even use this in a smaller room relatively close to the talent. The 1000 definitely going to be moving more like 3 or 4 meters away, even if you're shooting it through a scrim. And at that level, I didn't find any issues with sound. And then, of course, the 2000 is a bit louder, but it is not generally something, again, that you would use in very close to your talent. I see that as more of a specialty light. For me, I'm shooting, again, mostly headshots and talking head style video. And in those cases, you don't generally use a light quite that powerful. That's more of a special purpose light. The Superpanel was interesting in that it also has a fanless mode. That is to say, you can turn the fan off. When you do that, you're locked to 50% power, which is still quite a lot of power output. But it's nice if you do have to work in really close, you can completely cut the sound that the fan generates and get crystal clear audio. Another things that make these professional lights is that they have DMX control, DMX 512, both an input and output on 5-pin XLRs, which is the standard. And what this means is that you can use these in theater, stage, TV studio, for broadcast, any places where you're already using DMX, or you can add DMX accessories, which include controllers, computer controllers, mixing boards, so on and so forth. You have a lot of options, even wireless controllers, that will allow you to make the control of them entirely wireless. So lots of options there if you are working in that type of environment. One thing that's critically important when you're shooting professionally is support and being able to rely on the manufacturer to help you out in situations where something goes wrong with one of the devices. So in this case, Lupo has just started selling the Dayled and Superpanel here in the United States, and we've got links for each of those down below. But they also told me a couple of other things that are very interesting. They do have a service center based in Texas in the United States, so for those of you shooting in the US, you now have that. But what they've also done is the design of the light has been componentized in some respects. So what that means in practical terms is there are kind of just a few things that go wrong on lighting fixtures. Number one, the LED could go out potentially, or the electronics could go out, or the fan could go out. And the way they've built these, the components are actually just modules that they can actually remove the entire thing and put the new thing in. So that should result in relatively quick turnaround times for repairs. And you do have the peace of mind knowing that you can actually have it repaired in the same country. So overall, there's an overview of the Lupo Dayled and Superpanel lines. We'll be doing lighting demonstrations and other things with these in future episodes, so stick around for those. Overall, I'm really pleased with the Lupo Dayleds and the Superpanel. Really impressive lights. They're a little bit more expensive than you would pay for most of the prosumer type lighting, but I think there are definitely some features there that make them worthwhile in terms of that cost, particularly if you are shooting for a living, if you're actually getting paid for shooting your videos. I understand this is not necessarily the area for people that are totally self-funded. They're a little on the expensive side, but if you're shooting a lot or you're getting paid, then it's definitely worth the peace of mind that comes along with the higher build quality and the ability to have them repaired, along with all the very thoughtful features that come with them. So, hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. And if you've not already subscribed, make sure you do that, and we'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. And if you'd like to be notified each time a new episode posts, go ahead and click the bell icon. We'll talk to you soon.